For the past 17 years, Karasuma Yoichi was a kid living a life completely void of modernism. Yoichi's father was teaching him their Ukiha Divine Wind Style of swordplay, and Yoichi was at a point in his training when his father had nothing left to teach him. Yoichi's father orders him to leave the mountains and get a taste of city life, where he was supposed to meet up with the Ikarugas, who could teach Yoichi some new martial arts at their family dojo. The Ikaruga were four sisters, namely Ibuki, Kagome, Chihaya, and Ayame. And these sisters were supposed to let Yoichi crash at their place with respect to the acquaintanceship between the two houses. Yoichi makes it to the city the next day, and from the get-go, he stands out in the crowd due to his weird samurai clothing. A rude guy even tries to hurt Yoichi physically, but he easily beats him up. Yoichi is arrested by the police for an act of violence in public, but the officers let him go soon after realizing that he's just naive and not a bad guy. Yoichi was supposed to meet with the Ikarugas, but he gets lost in a mall while navigating. Without even realizing it, Mr. Samurai comes across Ayame and Chihaya, and afterwards he finds a thief running away with an old lady's handbag. Yoichi was a kind guy, so he chases the thief down and puts him to sleep so the police will have an easier time. Things were quite hectic in the city, and Yoichi starts feeling like this whole city life is not really up his alley, and that he should just go back to the mountains when he finds a random little girl who had gotten lost. The girl was Kagome Ikaruga, and without even knowing it, Yoichi offers to help the little one out. The cops get on Yoichi's tail again, but while he was returning Kagome to Ibuki, she catches onto his sword style and realizes that this must be the guy she was supposed to meet. Ibuki introduces herself to Yoichi later outside, and after settling down, she takes Yoichi back to the Ikaruga residence, where he will be spending his upcoming days, and probably dealing with whatever modern challenges this new life throws his way. On this sudden change, the sisters had different opinions about letting a random guy stay at their place. The four were sort of holding a meeting in their backyard, where Ayame was completely against letting this dude stay at the house, but Ibuki remarked that she had trust in him, and hence the others had to comply as she was the oldest in the family. The next morning, Ibuki was cleaning the house when her trust in Yoichi increased after seeing his elegant swordplay. Ibuki was getting along just fine with Yoichi, but a few misunderstandings put Yoichi in a bad place. Ibuki sends this dude flying from the roof, and he also ends up making Ayame mad. Yoichi receives some beating from Ibuki before having breakfast, and while eating, he comes to know that the girls had gotten him enrolled in their school, so he is supposed to come alongside them. Yoichi was really grateful for all that the girls were doing, and his kind attitude gets them further confused about how to treat this guy. The rude guy who Yoichi defeated earlier also went to this school, and his name was Ryo Washizu. Washizu was sort of the cool guy at school, and seeing Yoichi enroll in his class kinda gets him feeling insecure. Yoichi's odd speech and clothing got him quite popular among the girls, and while he was having the time of his life, his drooling over girls got Ibuki mad. Ibuki beats Yoichi again before scolding him, and while these two are busy, Washizu had a crush on Ibuki, and after assuming that Yoichi would steal her from him, he challenges Yoichi to a duel. A lot of students gather to watch this fight, and even though Yoichi was looking to have a fair fist fight, he soon realized that in real life, people outside of the mountains don't play by the same rules as he does. Yoichi snaps after Washizu pulls out his gauntlets, and he knocks Washizu out cold with a single kick. The duel was seen by Ayame as well, and it seemed to change her opinion of Yoichi. The first day of school goes fine for Yoichi, but as soon as he makes it back home, bro catches a bad fever. Ibuki tells him to rest as she leaves to get some supplies, and seeing his condition, Ayame tries to make him a nice meal. Ayame hadn't cooked before, but she managed to put something together with the help of Kagome. While Ibuki was out, Yoichi comes to know that she isn't actually violent, but she ends up hitting her siblings and Yoichi since she finds herself responsible for them. This gets Yoichi to feel a bit bad for assuming that Ibuki is a violent woman, and after she gets back home, both of them laugh the misunderstanding off. Seeing Ibuki having fun with Yoichi makes Ayame kind of sad, and we get to see through a flashback how always being worse than Ibuki bothered Ayame throughout her life. Ayame was running back to her room in tears with her meal, when she ends up stumbling and the food falls out of the window. Luckily for her though, Yoichi was right beside her and he easily gets a hold of the food, even appreciating the effort Ayame put in for him after a little taste. Yoichi's praise puts a big smile on Ayame's face, and Yoichi's popularity seems to be on the rise when a couple more girls enter town looking for him. The two women were Tsubasa Tsubame and her subordinate Angela, or Angie. Tsubasa was from the mountains just like Yoichi, and she had come to the city just for the sake of defeating Yoichi and reviving the Tsubame style of martial arts. Tsubasa enrolls in Yoichi's class to get close to him, but her school life doesn't go all that smoothly, courtesy of her introverted nature. Tsubasa's cuteness gets her surrounded by a lot of other students, and she almost gets overwhelmed by this much attention. The girl was having a hard time hanging in there when Yoichi and Ibuki reach out to him, and she ends up befriending them. Tsubasa proceeds to enjoy her school life, and she even gets a crush on Washizu. After a little while, Angie gets annoyed by this, and she tries to remind Tsubasa that they must defeat Yoichi in a duel, as an unknown client was offering them a lot of money, which they could then use to revive their family's martial art. Tsubasa didn't have real motivation to be a martial artist and just wanted to live a normal life, so Angie had no choice but to force her. Angie goes further than she should have, and her actions lead Tsubasa to cry. Tsubasa felt really bad as Angie embarrassed her in front of Washizu, and she tells Angie that she hates both martial arts and her. Angie prefers to leave Tsubasa alone for the time being, and she runs over to the Ikaruga dojo so she can get the job done herself. Angie challenges Yoichi for a fight, but her reasoning gets our boy mad, and he makes Angie realize that trusting an unknown client to revive the Tsubame Benten style would never really work in the long run. Yoichi's reasoning somehow makes sense to Angie, and she leaves the dojo to meet Tsubasa outside, where both of them apologize to each other. On the next day, Yoichi is out with Ibuki when they come across Tsubasa and Angie, as they had gotten themselves real jobs in a restaurant so they can raise honest funds to revive the Tsubame Benten style. A little while later, Ibuki requests Yoichi to help her out in teaching her students and Ayame more about swordplay. Yoichi didn't know how to show his skills off, so he ended up deciding to duel Ibuki. The duel was for the students to watch and learn, but Yoichi starts enjoying fighting Ibuki and he gets in the zone a bit too much. Yoichi cuts Ibuki's dress down during sparring, and that gets him and the students to receive some nice beating. After training, Yoichi was hanging out in the backyard when Chihaya approached them and asked them to help her out with her manga. Chihaya was having a rough time with ideas, so she takes Yoichi to her room, wanting to interview him. Yoichi is impressed by Chihaya's dedication towards drawing manga, and Chihaya finds the moment fitting to flirt with Yoichi. Chihaya was just playing with Yoichi, trying to get a reaction out of him, when Ibuki runs in on them and she gets mad at Yoichi's perverted tendencies. Ibuki gets a bit embarrassed when Chihaya mentions how she argues with Yoichi as if they were a couple, but despite her reaction, she doesn't look like she was against the idea all that much. The next day, Yoichi was being chased around the house by Ibuki again, when he ran into Kagome and broke her art project. Kagome starts crying, and after shutting Yoichi out of the house, Ibuki tells him to bring Chihaya's notebook to her when she was in her cram school. Yoichi happily agrees to make it up to Ibuki, but even after making it to the cram school, our samurai boy continues to get himself in trouble. After continuing to receive his usual beating from women, Yoichi makes it to Chihaya, and while returning her notebook, Yoichi is really taken aback by Chihaya's dedication to her art. Yoichi was still in school after class was over, and as he was walking around, he came across 3 random guys who were laughing about them picking on Chihaya. Yoichi heads straight over to check out for himself when he finds Chihaya's drafts being torn apart. This was the first time Yoichi heard Chihaya crying, and he rushed over to teach those 3 boys a lesson. These guys were just spoiled brats who had nothing of interest in their lives, and they hated both Yoichi and Chihaya for being serious about something tangible. Yoichi beats the 3 up regardless, and afterwards, Chihaya comes to an understanding with them while she is heading back home. Later at home, Chihaya finally gets the idea she wanted and reveals how she plans to make a manga about Yoichi, intending to share how he helped her through her art. Yoichi was already flabbergasted by this, and at the end of the day, he makes Chihaya romantically interested in himself as well, making the other 2 sisters extremely mad. Yoichi's popularity was not just limited to the Ikaruga, as one day in school, he got approached by a beautiful first-year student named Hinagata Yui. Yui leaves Yoichi with a letter, and after coming to know that Yui is famous, Yoichi starts looking forward to their duel. Sadly for Yoichi though, the letter was a love letter, where Yui asked him out on a date this weekend. Yoichi wasn't interested at first, since he didn't know what dates even were, but after some quick self-education, bro didn't seem to be against the proposition. While the boys at school were getting jealous of Yoichi getting all the girls, Ibuki starts overreacting out of embarrassment as well. Ibuki leaves to cool her head off, but soon she returns to the class and asks Yoichi to go on a date with her as well, making the lives of other boys even more miserable. Ibuki wanted to go on a practice date with Yoichi so he wouldn't destroy the dojo's reputation, and after hearing her reasoning, our samurai agreed to follow along. Later, the two meet up outside a mall, but Yoichi's clothing keeps getting crowd attention, and Ibuki had to first buy him some normal clothes. The pair then proceed to a bowling alley where they are spotted by Ayame, as she was also in the same mall. Ayame realizes the other two sisters were also spying on Ibuki and Yoichi, so the three chose to join forces and prefer spying together. The masked guy who was bribing Tsubasa and Angie is also seen to be keeping an eye on Yoichi, but he maintains his distance and Yoichi's date continues. Yoichi and Ibuki were having a lot of fun throughout the day, and after reaching a park, Ibuki got lost in her feelings and tried to hold hands with Yoichi, just like the other couples around them. In her attempt, both she and Yoichi fall into the fountain, but this time she just laughs it off and doesn't seem to mind being clumsy around Yoichi. The date was coming to an end, so Yoichi gave Ibuki a plushie as a gift, but he kind of killed the mood after reminding Ibuki that this was a practice date. Ibuki runs off to grab a drink, and Yui pulls up on the samurai. Yoichi turns Yui down for the date, and she surprisingly pulls a weapon out, intending to slay him. Yui was just playing an act earlier in order to catch Yoichi being vulnerable, but Yoichi defeats her using a mere stick. Chihaya and Kagome run into Yoichi and they meet up with Ibuki to head back home. After her defeat, it turns out that the same masked man has also hired Yui to take Yoichi down, but after multiple failed attempts, it seemed like the only option he had left was going all out against Yoichi. We take a little detour from Yoichi and meet Washizu again. Bro was still confused about returning the handkerchief he got from Ibuki on the day he fought Yoichi. While Yoichi was adding more girls to his harem, Washizu was still fantasizing about being Ibuki's lover. At first, Washizu just plans to hand it over to Ibuki, looking cool, but his elite scheme doesn't quite work when Ibuki is running around the hallway with Yoichi. Next, Washizu plans to get a little romantic, and he leaves a letter in Ibuki's locker, hoping that she would meet him on the rooftop after reading it. On the contrary, both Ibuki and Yoichi read that letter together, and instead of Ibuki, Washizu finds his favorite samurai holding that letter. Washizu's letter had given the wrong impression, and it seemed to Yoichi as if he wanted to learn martial arts. Washizu was a bit annoyed by Yoichi, but he happily accepted the offer when Ibuki herself invited him to the dojo. Washizu's addition was quite pleasant for Ibuki, and while she was going back home, she stopped on her way to thank Yoichi for making early morning cleaning and even overall time in the dojo way more enjoyable. After Ibuki's remarks, both Yoichi and Washizu were looking forward to today's training session, but elsewhere, the masked guy from earlier is revealed to be on the move. That guy reaches out to the best Japanese assassin named Nuazume Jinjiro, and he offers him a lot of money to put Yoichi Karasuma and his Divine Wind Style into the ground. Jinjuro turns out to be more passionate than the contractor was hoping for, when he swore to straight up kill Yoichi even without demanding any compensation. Back in town, Washizu reaches Ibuki's place a few hours after school, and even though he was happy beyond measure after looking at Ibuki in her training outfit, the guy gets a bit devastated after finding out that his beloved samurai was also in that same house. Due to Washizu being a newbie, Ibuki assigns Yoichi to teach him some basics of martial arts. And despite arguing with Yoichi, Washizu solidifies his will to stick through today's training session just for Ibuki. The dojo was quite lively for the first time, and the noise even attracted Chihaya and Kagome's attention. The training goes just fine until Yoichi thinks that everyone is as thick-skinned as him, and he mistakenly hits Washizu so hard that he almost falls unconscious. Ibuki scolds Yoichi for going so hard on Washizu, and while it bothered Ayame, it helped Yoichi realize that he needed more training as well. The group moves back to the dojo where Yoichi apologizes to Washizu and tells him to start off with some basic strength training like doing push-ups. Washizu was fine with pumping out 100 of these just for the flex, but things get really competitive when Yoichi joins in on the training. Chihaya and Kagome leave to grab some stuff from the supermarket so they can prepare a nice dinner for the newcomer, and by the time they came back, the boys were at 400 push-ups each. Washizu has had enough for the day, but he couldn't help himself from continuing as Yoichi was intending to hit that 1,000 mark. The training became more of a battle of prides, and the only thing that got Washizu through the challenge was the time he spent fantasizing about Ibuki. After the lesson was over, Washizu was sure that this would be the last time he set foot in this dojo, but at dinner, when Ibuki gave him delicious food, bro had a complete change of mind. The dinner also fixed Ayame's mood, but while everyone was having fun in the dojo, Jinjuro had made it really close to Yoichi, and it didn't look like he had any plan of going easy when he inevitably comes across the Harem King of Samurais. And that brings us to the end of today's recap. Thanks for sticking till the end, and let us know in the comments if you guys want a second part of this series. Don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one. Peace!